Sometimes the earth itself becomes a witness to human determination. Sometimes what looks like a prison becomes a doorway to freedom. And, sometimes, when everyone believes you're helpless and trapped, the very ground beneath your feet holds the secret to your salvation. This is the story of Maria Santos, a woman who discovered that being buried alive wasn't the end of her story, it was just the beginning of the most extraordinary fight for survival anyone had ever witnessed. What happened in those dark hours underground would challenge everything we think we know about human endurance, ingenuity, and the will to live. They thought she was trapped. They were wrong. Maria Santos had always been fascinated by the old stories her grandmother told about the abandoned silver mines that honeycombed the mountains around their small Mexican village. As a child, she would sit on her grandmother's lap and listen to tales of brave miners who worked deep underground, their headlamps cutting through the darkness as they searched for precious metals hidden in the earth's belly. Now, at 32, Maria worked as a geological surveyor for a mining company that was considering reopening some of these historical sites. Her job was to assess the structural integrity of the old tunnels and determine which areas might be safe for modern excavation. It was dangerous work, but Maria loved the challenge and the connection to her family's history. On that Tuesday morning in October, Maria arrived at the San Miguel mine site before dawn. The entrance to the old tunnel was partially hidden by decades of overgrowth, and morning mist clung to the mountainside like ghostly fingers. Her equipment was loaded into a sturdy backpack: geological hammers, sample containers, measuring devices, emergency flares, and, most importantly, her communication radio that would keep her connected to her surface team. Miguel Hernandez, her safety coordinator, helped her check the equipment one final time. "Remember, Maria, 2-hour limit today. These old tunnels haven't been properly surveyed in 40 years. We don't know what we're dealing with down there." Maria nodded, adjusting her hard hat and switching on her headlamp. "I'll be careful, Miguel. The preliminary readings suggest this section should be stable, but I won't take any unnecessary risks." The tunnel entrance was narrow, requiring Maria to duck slightly as she made her way inside. The air was cool and damp, carrying the metallic scent of mineral deposits and the earthy smell of decades-old wooden support beams. Her footsteps echoed softly as she moved deeper into the mine, her headlamp beam revealing rough-hewn walls and the occasional glint of quartz veins. She paused every few meters to take photographs and collect rock samples, documenting the condition of the support structures and making notes about potential safety concerns. The tunnel stretched ahead of her like a throat leading into the mountain's depths, and she could feel the weight of tons of rock and earth pressing down from above. About 40 minutes into her survey, Maria reached a junction where the main tunnel branched into 3 smaller passages. According to her maps, the center passage led to what had once been the mine's most productive area. She decided to explore this section first, knowing that it would give her the best indication of the overall site's potential. As she moved into the narrower passage, Maria noticed that the air seemed thicker here, and she could hear the faint sound of water dripping somewhere in the darkness ahead. The wooden support beams in this section were older and showed more signs of deterioration than those in the main tunnel. She made careful notes about the condition of these supports, knowing that any future mining operation would require significant reinforcement work. The passage gradually widened into a small chamber that had clearly been excavated by hand decades ago. Tool marks were still visible in the rock walls, and Maria could imagine the miners who had once worked in this very spot, their picks and shovels carving out chunks of stone in search of silver ore. She was examining the ceiling of the chamber when she heard a sound that made her blood run cold. It started as a low rumble, almost like distant thunder, but quickly grew into a groaning, cracking noise that seemed to come from the very walls around her. Years of training kicked in, and Maria immediately recognized what was happening. The tunnel was collapsing. She spun toward the passage entrance just as the first chunks of rock began to fall. Dust filled the air, and the rumbling grew louder, more violent. Maria ran toward the exit, but she was too late. With a thunderous roar that seemed to shake the entire mountain, the ceiling of the passage came down in a cascade of stone and earth. The world went black. When Maria regained consciousness, she couldn't tell how much time had passed. Her head throbbed, and she could taste blood in her mouth. The silence was complete and terrifying, the kind of absolute quiet that only exists deep underground. She tried to move and realized she was trapped in a space barely large enough for her body. Rock and debris pressed against her from all sides. Fighting down a wave of panic, Maria forced herself to think clearly. She was alive, which meant there was still hope. Her hard hat was still on her head, and, amazingly, her headlamp was still working, though the beam seemed dimmer than before. She could move her arms slightly, which meant she wasn't completely immobilized. She reached for her radio with trembling fingers, praying that it hadn't been damaged in the collapse. Static filled her earpiece as she pressed the transmit button. "Miguel, this is Maria. Can you hear me? The tunnel has collapsed. I'm trapped, but I'm alive." More static. Then, faintly, she heard Miguel's voice crackling through the interference. "Maria. Thank God. We felt the collapse up here. Are you injured? What's your situation?" "I'm in an air pocket," Maria replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "I can't see how big it is, but I can move my arms and head. The passage behind me is completely blocked." "Okay, listen carefully." Miguel's voice was tense but professional. "We're calling for a rescue team, but it's going to take time. These old mines are unstable, and we need specialized equipment. You need to conserve your energy and your air. Can you tell how much breathing space you have?" Maria moved her headlamp beam around slowly, taking stock of her prison. The air pocket was roughly cylindrical, perhaps 3 feet wide and not quite long enough for her to stretch out completely. Above her head, large rocks created a precarious ceiling that could collapse further at any moment. But there was something else, something that gave her hope. "Miguel," she said into the radio, "I can feel air moving. There's a breeze coming from somewhere." This was crucial information. If air was circulating, it meant there was another way out, or at least a connection to the surface that could provide breathable air until rescue arrived. Maria began to explore her confined space more carefully, running her hands along the walls and floor, searching for the source of the air current. That's when she felt it, a slight depression in the floor near her feet, and cool air was definitely flowing up from below. Using her geological hammer, she began carefully scraping away loose dirt and small stones. The depression grew deeper, revealing what appeared to be a natural fissure in the rock floor. As she worked, Maria could hear Miguel's voice on the radio, coordinating with rescue teams and explaining the situation to experts who specialized in mine collapses. The conversations were both reassuring and terrifying. Reassuring because help was coming, terrifying because of how complex and dangerous the rescue would be. "The main tunnel is completely blocked," she heard Miguel explain to someone. "We're talking about tons of rock and debris. Even with heavy equipment, it could take days to clear a path, and any vibration could cause secondary collapses." Days. Maria closed her eyes and tried not to think about how little air she might have, how much water, how long her flashlight battery would last. Instead, she focused on the fissure she was slowly widening. The airflow was becoming stronger, which suggested that the opening led somewhere significant. Hours passed. Her radio conversations with Miguel became more intermittent as the battery began to weaken and atmospheric interference increased. But Maria continued working, using her tools and even her bare hands to carefully excavate around the fissure. The work was exhausting in the confined space, and she had to rest frequently, but something told her this opening was important, possibly her only real chance of survival. As she worked, memories of her grandmother's stories kept returning to her. The old woman had often talked about how the ancient miners had discovered natural cave systems connected to their excavations, sometimes finding springs of fresh water or chambers filled with clean air. "The mountain has many secrets," her grandmother used to say. "Sometimes it hides treasures that have nothing to do with silver or gold." When Maria's headlamp finally began to dim, she had managed to create an opening large enough to fit her shoulders through. The air current was now strong enough to be unmistakable, carrying with it scents that suggested a larger space below. She tried her radio one more time, but got only static. The battery was failing. Looking down into the dark opening she had created, Maria faced the most difficult decision of her life. She could stay where she was, in a space she knew was stable, and hope that rescue teams could reach her in time. Or she could trust the mountain's secrets and follow the air current into unknown depths, betting her life on the possibility that the fissure led to safety. Above her, she could hear the occasional groan and shift of unstable rock. Her air pocket might not remain stable much longer. With her headlamp growing dimmer by the minute, Maria realized she might have only one chance to make the right choice. She thought of her grandmother's words, "Sometimes the mountain hides treasures that have nothing to do with silver or gold." Perhaps the greatest treasure the mountain could offer right now was a way out. Maria took a deep breath, said a quick prayer, and began lowering herself into the fissure. The opening was tight, but not impossibly so. As her feet found purchase on rough stone below, she felt the air current growing stronger, cooler, more promising. The last thing she saw before her headlamp died completely was the narrow beam of light illuminating rough rock walls that seemed to extend far deeper than she had imagined. Then, darkness closed around her like a living thing, and Maria Santos began the most extraordinary journey of her life into the secret heart of the mountain. In absolute darkness, every other sense becomes magnified. Maria could hear her own breathing echoing off unseen walls, feel the smooth coolness of water-carved rock beneath her fingertips, and smell the clean, mineral-rich air that continued to flow around her. The fissure had opened into what felt like a natural cave system, and she was no longer trapped in a coffin-like space. Moving carefully in the pitch black, Maria used her geological training to navigate by touch. The floor sloped gently downward, and she could feel that she was in a passage carved by water over thousands of years. The air current remained strong and fresh, which meant this cave system had to connect to the surface somewhere. Her job now was to follow that air to its source. Progress was slow and methodical. Maria tested each step before putting her full weight down, feeling for loose rocks or sudden drops. Her hands traced the walls constantly, both for balance and to understand the shape and direction of the passage. The cave seemed to be leading her deeper into the mountain, but the steady airflow gave her confidence that she was moving in the right direction. After what felt like hours of careful movement, Maria's fingers detected a change in the wall texture. Instead of smooth, water-carved stone, she was feeling rougher surfaces with regular patterns. She explored more carefully and realized with excitement that these were tool marks, human-made cuts in the rock. Somehow, she had found another part of the old mine system, perhaps a section that connected to natural caves. This discovery filled her with new hope. If she was back in the mine system, there might be other passages, maybe even alternative exits that the modern survey teams didn't know about. Her grandmother's stories came back to her again, tales of secret tunnels and hidden chambers that the old miners had discovered but kept to themselves. As she continued forward, feeling her way along the worked stone walls, Maria began to notice something else, the faint sound of running water. At first, she thought it might be her imagination, but the sound gradually became clearer and more distinct. Following the sound, she discovered that the passage branched, and one branch clearly led toward the source of the water. Thirst was becoming a serious concern. Maria had been trapped for many hours, and the physical exertion of her escape attempt had left her mouth dry and sticky. The sound of water was irresistible, but she forced herself to be cautious. Underground streams could be dangerous, they might lead to flooded chambers or precipitous drops. Moving even more carefully, Maria followed the sound until her outstretched hand encountered empty space. She was at the edge of what felt like a larger chamber. Kneeling down, she explored the area with her hands and discovered that the floor dropped away into what seemed to be a pool or underground stream. The water was moving, but slowly, and when she cupped her hand to taste it, she found it clean and surprisingly sweet. Maria drank carefully, knowing that too much water too quickly could make her sick, but the relief was enormous. The clean taste suggested that this water was filtering down from surface streams, which meant she was still connected to the world above. As she knelt by the water's edge, she began to form a more complete picture of where she was. The cave system was extensive and had been at least partially incorporated into the old mining operations. The miners had followed natural fissures and caverns, expanding them where necessary but also discovering chambers that nature had already carved out. This water source might have been one of the reasons the original mine had been located here. Fresh water was essential for mining operations. Refreshed by the water, Maria continued her journey through the dark passages. She was beginning to understand the layout better now. The natural caves seemed to form a rough network, with some passages leading upward toward what she hoped was the surface, while others descended deeper into the mountain. The key was following the air currents and choosing passages that led upward whenever possible. The next major discovery came when Maria's exploring hands found wooden beams again, but these were different from the deteriorated supports she had seen in the collapsed tunnel. These beams felt solid and well-preserved, and they were supporting what seemed to be a more formal mine passage. Even more encouraging, she could feel metal rails beneath her feet, the tracks that had once carried ore carts out of the mine. Following the rails in the darkness, Maria reasoned that they had to lead somewhere useful. Mine railways always connected working areas to surface exits. Even if this particular exit was sealed or hidden, it would give her a better sense of direction and might lead to other passages that were still viable. The railway tunnel proved to be in remarkably good condition. The air was dry and fresh, and Maria could walk upright without constantly worrying about low ceiling or unstable walls. Her pace increased significantly, though she remained careful about testing the ground ahead of her. She had no idea how far this tunnel extended or what obstacles she might encounter. As she walked, Maria began to hear new sounds echoing through the darkness ahead, not the natural sounds of water or shifting rock, but something that made her heart race with possibility. Voices. Faint and distant, but definitely human voices. She stopped and listened intently, trying to determine the direction and distance. The voices seemed to be coming from somewhere above her and to the right. They were too distant for her to make out words, but the tone suggested urgency and organization, exactly what she would expect from a rescue operation. Moving more quickly now, Maria followed the sounds while staying on the railway tracks. The tunnel began to slope upward, and the voices became gradually clearer. She could make out individual words in Spanish: equipment, careful, signals. It was definitely a rescue team, and they seemed to be working somewhere above her current position. The challenge was finding a way to reach them. The tunnel she was following was clearly leading in the right general direction, but she needed to find a connection point. As she moved forward, feeling along the walls for side passages or vertical shafts, Maria began to call out. "Hello? Can anyone hear me? I'm down here in the tunnels." She paused to listen, then called out again. On her third attempt, the voices above suddenly stopped, then became excited and urgent. Someone had heard her. Maria. Maria Santos. The voice was Miguel's, and it was coming from somewhere not too far above. "Keep calling. We're trying to locate you. I'm here." Maria shouted as loudly as she could. "I'm in a tunnel with railway tracks. I can hear you clearly." What followed was the most complex and challenging communication session of Maria's life. The rescue team could hear her, but locating her exact position proved difficult. Sound traveled in unexpected ways through the interconnected cave and tunnel system. What seemed close might be separated by solid rock, while distant sounds could carry clearly through specific acoustic channels. Through careful coordination, with Maria describing everything she could feel and the rescue team using sensitive listening equipment, they gradually pieced together her location. She was in an old mining tunnel that connected to the natural cave system, approximately 50 meters below and to the east of where the main rescue effort was focused. The rescuers faced a dilemma. The main tunnel collapse that had trapped Maria was too extensive and dangerous to clear quickly. But now they knew she was mobile and in a relatively stable part of the underground system. The question was whether it would be safer and faster to try to reach her from above or to guide her to a point where she could reach the surface on her own. Captain Roberto Flores, the rescue team leader, made contact with Maria directly through a communication device that could penetrate the rock between them. "Maria, we're mapping the old mine system using historical records. There are at least 3 other entrances to the mine complex, but we're not sure which ones are still accessible. We need you to continue moving and help us determine which route is viable." This transformed Maria's situation from passive waiting to active participation in her own rescue. Using her geological knowledge and the guidance of the surface team, she began systematically exploring the tunnel system, reporting back on conditions and looking for routes that led upward toward known entrance points. The railway tunnel proved to be a main artery of the old mine system. following it in different directions, Maria discovered connections to multiple side passages, vertical shafts, and natural caverns. Some routes were blocked by collapsed rock, others were flooded, but gradually a picture emerged of several possible escape routes. The most promising path led through a series of natural chambers toward what the historical maps indicated was a ventilation shaft. This shaft had been dug to provide fresh air to the deepest parts of the mine, and it extended almost to the surface. If it was still intact and not completely sealed, it could provide a way out. Following the rescue team's guidance, Maria made her way through increasingly complex passages toward the ventilation shaft area. The journey required climbing over rock falls, wading through shallow pools, and squeezing through tight spaces where ceiling collapses had partially blocked passages. But her confidence was growing with each obstacle overcome. The air current that had saved her life was becoming stronger and more consistent, confirming that she was moving toward a significant opening to the surface. Even more encouraging, she was beginning to see faint traces of light, not electrical light, but the gray hint of natural daylight filtering down from far above. When Maria finally reached the base of the ventilation shaft, she found herself in a circular chamber carved directly upward through the rock. Looking up, she could see a tiny disk of actual sky perhaps 30 meters above her head. The shaft walls were rough and uneven, carved with handholds and ledges that the original miners had used for maintenance access. "I can see sky," she called up toward the surface, and the joy in her voice carried clearly to the rescue team waiting above. "The shaft is clear. I think I can climb it." What she found at the bottom of the shaft made the climb possible, a series of wooden ladders and metal rungs that the miners had installed for accessing the ventilation system. Many were old and potentially unsafe, but Maria's geological training included ropework and climbing in dangerous conditions. More importantly, the rescue team above could now provide direct support. The climb took almost 2 hours. Maria had to test each rung and ladder section carefully, sometimes finding alternate handholds when the original supports proved too deteriorated to trust. The rescue team above fed down a safety rope that she could clip into at regular intervals, ensuring that a fall wouldn't be fatal. As she climbed higher, the disk of sky above grew larger and brighter. She could hear voices clearly now, and occasional glimpses of movement at the top of the shaft. The air was fresh and sweet, carrying the scents of pine trees and mountain flowers. After nearly 12 hours in absolute darkness, the gradual return of light was almost overwhelming. When Maria's hand finally reached the top edge of the shaft and strong arms pulled her out into the afternoon sunlight, the cheers of the rescue team echoed across the mountain. She had done something extraordinary, not just survived a mine collapse, but navigated her way through an unknown underground system to find her own way to safety. But, as she sat on the mountainside, wrapped in emergency blankets and being checked by paramedics, Maria realized that her story was only beginning. The route she had discovered opened up possibilities that no one had imagined. The old mine system was far more extensive and better preserved than anyone knew, and the natural cave network provided connections that could revolutionize understanding of the mountain's geology. Most importantly, Maria had proven something profound about human determination and intelligence. When trapped in an impossible situation, she hadn't just waited for rescue, she had used her knowledge, her courage, and her grandmother's wisdom to turn a death trap into a pathway to freedom. The hospital examination revealed that Maria had somehow emerged from her underground ordeal in remarkably good condition. Apart from minor cuts and bruises, dehydration that responded quickly to treatment, and exhaustion that a good night's sleep would cure, she was essentially unharmed. What amazed the medical team was her mental state. Instead of the trauma and disorientation they expected from someone who had spent 12 hours trapped underground, Maria was alert, focused, and eager to discuss what she had discovered. Dr. Elena Ramirez, who had examined dozens of mining accident survivors, had never seen anything quite like it. Most people who survive cave-ins or mine collapses are severely traumatized by the experience, she explained to Maria's family. They need weeks or months of psychological support to deal with claustrophobia and anxiety. But Maria seems energized by what happened to her. She keeps talking about the cave system as if she's made some kind of breakthrough discovery. Maria's excitement was indeed centered on the underground network she had navigated. During her debriefing with the rescue team and mining company officials, she provided detailed descriptions of passages, chambers, and connections that didn't match any of their historical records. According to the official mine maps, the system she had traveled through shouldn't exist. Captain Roberto Flores, who had coordinated the rescue operation, was the first to understand the significance of what Maria was describing. "We've been operating under the assumption that the San Miguel mine was a relatively simple system of tunnels following silver veins," he explained to the assembled officials. "But Maria is describing a complex network that incorporates natural cave systems, multiple levels, and connections between different historical mining operations." The implications were staggering. If Maria's descriptions were accurate, the mountain contained a vast underground network that could revolutionize both mining operations and scientific understanding of the region's geology. But there was only one way to verify her claims: someone would have to map the system she had navigated. 3 days after her rescue, Maria found herself back at the San Miguel site, but this time as part of a large scientific expedition rather than a routine survey. Geologists from the National University had joined forces with mining engineers, cave exploration specialists, and even archaeologists who were interested in the historical mining techniques Maria had encountered underground. The expedition was carefully planned and extensively equipped. Unlike her previous solo survey, this exploration involved multiple safety systems, communication networks, and emergency protocols. But the key element was Maria herself. She was the only person who had actually traveled through the underground system and could guide the team to the most significant discoveries. Professor Carlos Mendoza, a renowned cave systems expert from the university, served as the expedition's scientific leader. He had initially been skeptical of Maria's claims, but after reviewing her detailed sketches and descriptions, he became convinced that she had stumbled upon something truly extraordinary. "What Maria is describing," he explained to the gathered team, "suggests that this mountain contains a natural cave system that was partially incorporated into historical mining operations, but never properly mapped or understood. The combination of natural caverns with human-made tunnels could create a network covering several square kilometers underground. The entrance to Maria's route was through the same ventilation shaft she had climbed to escape, but now properly rigged with safety equipment and communication lines." As the team descended into the circular chamber at the bottom of the shaft, their powerful LED lighting systems revealed details that Maria had only been able to feel in the darkness. The chamber was larger and more perfectly carved than anyone had expected. The walls showed clear tool marks, but they also revealed natural rock formations that indicated the miners had followed and expanded an existing natural void. This combination of human engineering and natural geology was repeated throughout the system as the team followed Maria's route in reverse. Each chamber and passage revealed new surprises. In the area where Maria had found fresh water, the team discovered an underground spring that connected to surface streams through a series of natural fissures. This explained not only the clean, sweet water Maria had encountered, but also why this particular location had been chosen for mining operations decades earlier. The railway tunnel that had been Maria's highway to safety proved to be part of a much larger transportation network. Using historical research techniques and ground-penetrating radar, the team discovered that multiple mine sites in the region were connected by tunnels that followed natural cave passages. The miners had essentially created an underground transportation system linking different excavation sites across several kilometers of mountain terrain. But the most significant discovery came when the team reached the area where Maria had first heard rescue voices from above. What she had described as side passages turned out to be entrances to a series of natural chambers that had never been documented or explored. These chambers contained geological formations that provided new insights into how the mountain had been formed over millions of years. Dr. Sarah Chen, a geologist specializing in mineral formation, was among the first to explore these chambers. Her preliminary analysis suggested that the mountain contained mineral deposits far more extensive and diverse than previous surveys had indicated. "We're not just looking at silver mining potential," she reported to the expedition team. "These formations suggest the presence of rare earth elements and other valuable minerals that could have significant economic impact." The archaeological aspects of the discovery proved equally fascinating. Dr. Miguel Torres, an expert in pre-Columbian mining techniques, found evidence that the cave system had been known and used by indigenous peoples long before Spanish colonial mining operations. Carefully carved symbols in some of the deeper chambers suggested that ancient peoples had developed sophisticated understanding of the underground network. What Maria discovered by accident, Dr. Torres explained, was a site that has been significant to human activity for possibly thousands of years. The Spanish colonial miners didn't create this system, they adapted and expanded something that already existed. As the expedition continued over several weeks, the team began to understand that Maria's accidental journey had led to one of the most significant geological and archaeological discoveries in the region's history. The underground network was far more extensive than anyone had imagined, containing not just mining potential but also scientific value that could support research for decades. But perhaps the most important discovery was what Maria's experience revealed about human problem solving under extreme pressure. Her decision to explore the air current that led to her escape had been based on a combination of scientific knowledge, intuitive understanding of geological processes, and cultural wisdom passed down through her family's oral traditions. Professor Ana Gutierrez, a specialist in survival psychology, joined the team to study the decision-making processes that had saved Maria's life. What Maria accomplished represents a perfect synthesis of formal education, practical experience, and cultural knowledge, she observed. Her grandmother's stories about mountain secrets weren't just folklore, they contained practical wisdom about cave systems and underground water sources that proved crucial to survival. The mining company that had originally commissioned Maria's survey found itself in an unexpected position. What had started as a routine assessment of old mining potential had become a major scientific discovery with implications far beyond commercial excavation. The company made the decision to partner with the university and government agencies to develop the site as a research facility rather than a commercial mine. This decision was influenced partly by Maria herself, who had become an advocate for preserving and studying the underground system rather than exploiting it purely for mineral extraction. Her experience had given her a unique perspective on the mountain's value that went beyond immediate economic considerations. 6 months after her rescue, Maria stood once again at the entrance to the San Miguel site, but now she was wearing a new title, Lead Site Coordinator for the Mountain Research Initiative. Her job was to oversee ongoing exploration and research while ensuring that the underground system was preserved and studied responsibly. The ventilation shaft that had been her escape route was now a major access point for researchers from around the world who came to study the cave system's unique combination of natural formation and human adaptation. The chambers where Maria had felt her way through absolute darkness were now mapped and documented, but they still held mysteries that would take years to fully understand. Standing at the entrance to what everyone now called the Santos cave system, Maria often thought about the night she had made the decision to follow an air current into unknown darkness. It had seemed like a desperate gamble at the time, but it had led to discoveries that changed not just her own life, but scientific understanding of the entire region. Her grandmother's stories about mountain secrets had proven to contain more truth than anyone had realized. The mountain had indeed hidden treasures that had nothing to do with silver or gold, treasures of knowledge, of human history, and of the incredible things that become possible when determination meets wisdom. The ground had told a different story than what everyone expected. Instead of trapping Maria forever, it had guided her to safety and led to discoveries that would benefit generations of researchers and scholars. What had seemed like the end of her story had actually been the beginning of something far greater. As Maria prepared for another descent into the system she had accidentally discovered, she carried with her the same geological tools she had used on that October morning 6 months earlier. But now she also carried something else, the knowledge that sometimes the most important discoveries come not from careful planning, but from the courage to follow hope into darkness and trust that the earth itself might hold the answers we need. The mountain had kept its secrets for thousands of years, revealing them only to those brave enough and wise enough to understand what the ground was trying to tell them. Maria Santos had listened, and, in doing so, had opened a door to understanding that would remain open for generations to come.